the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin here, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And we are going to talk a little Miami Hurricanes football recruiting today with signing day about a week away. I know it seems like it snuck up on all of us, but here to talk about it is John Garcia Jr., National Recruiting Analyst for Rivals.com. Thanks for joining me today, John.
Thanks for having me.
So, John, first and foremost, I kind of want to ask you about the game that you went to last week. I know you were there for Zephyrhills and Jones. So Zephyrhills obviously is the team that five-star DJ Pickett plays for, the LSU commit that Miami would love to add to their 2025 class. And then Jones, of course, you got the quarterback Dereon Coleman and Vernell Brown, another receiver that Miami would love to flip from the Florida Gators, as well as Larry Miles, who is really thinking hard about the Hurricanes. What was your overall takeaway from that game, and what's the buzz with recruiting in regards to Miami?
Well, yeah, let's start with the Miami commitment, right? Dereon Coleman just kind of confirmed a lot of things. You know, we knew about the arm strength, right? I mean, the ball jumps off of the page when you watch it with DC. So I kind of wanted to see all the other things. How was he in the pocket? His presence, his mobility, his toughness. You know, how could he deal with the progression of a big time playoff game? Zephyrhills has Pickett, but they have a few other guys that are legitimate FBS prospects, including up front. So he did take, some pretty big shots in the game. And I thought it was really encouraging. He checked a lot of those boxes, very fluid in the pocket, just moves incredibly well. There's a confidence with him. I know he's a big Cam Ward fan, and a lot of people get on Cam for being kind of up to the last minute with his decision-making. And we kind of saw DC do a little bit of that, like really hanging in the pocket until the last moment, because he does have so much arm strength. And look, when you're throwing to Vernell Brown and Larry Miles, you can afford a little bit of extra time because those guys are pretty reliable. So I do see some of those influences, trickling in with Coleman. But look, just efficient, very accurate, really like his layering. He can turn and fire that thing quick and get the quick game going, which is important in every modern offense. But where he really impressed was that second level ball, in front of the safety, behind the linebacker, to all points of the field, whether it was outside the numbers or in between two safeties in the middle of the field. That's really where he did his biggest damage in terms of air yardage. And again, Brown and Miles were both, his most frequent targets there. Didn't turn it over, didn't take bad sacks. He didn't really, slow the offense down at all, when things weren't great. He either got rid of the football or he scrambled out of there for a short gain or a short loss. It was nothing catastrophic, which I think in a playoff scenario, and it was very cold out there as well, that's something you'd like to see from a guy who's really a first-year full-time starter. So obviously with DC, look, we want to see him add weight. He's 75 pounds, whatever it is. He knows that he is getting a little taller. He's kind of long for his size as well. So physically, we know he's got room to grow. But in terms of where his game is right now, it's really encouraging.
That's good to hear. I think the question about Dereon Coleman is really just his size. I think that's the only question, right? Because he's got one of the best arm talents in the entire country when it comes to the 2026 class. So I think everybody just has the question about his size. So when you see him in the game, did you kind of feel like, okay, well, is he too small? Did he look too small? Was he throwing sidearm? Did he get balls batted down in the pocket? What's your take on his size, and do you think that's even a thing?
It'll be a thing because it's quarterbacks. So anything negative or perceived to be negative will be highlighted. But no, I'm not worried about it. I think it's more of a weight gain situation just because of the wear and tear. But look, this was game, I think, 12 or 13 for DC. He's played every game. He's finished every game, unless it's a blowout. Then they pull him early. So he hasn't shown any signs of that physicality coming up against him. But no, if you look at the release here, it's classic. It's over the top to 3/4. So he's maximizing his height, and he's got long limbs. His legs and his arms are both very long. So he releases the ball. I would bet he releases the ball at or higher than Tua Tagovailoa in the NFL, even though he's shorter at this stage. So, excuse my voice here. I don't expect that to be an issue going forward.
Nice. But what about some of the other guys? Of course, DJ Pickett was out there. I did see some highlights that were posted in regards to him, but did you get a chance to kind of talk to him, or what's the feel about him, staying committed to LSU during this recruiting process?
Well, he didn't want to talk about anybody else, and I understand that. It's sensitive. It is that time of year where any quote kind of goes viral, and he just said, "We're signing on signing day. The plan is LSU. The last visit is LSU." So that's where their mindset and intention is at this time. So he didn't want to talk Georgia. He didn't want to talk Miami, Florida, Oregon, whoever else. This was short to the point. And look, he lost a playoff game. I wasn't gonna, go full reporter mode and push his dad away and say, hey, give us more time to reconnect here. But the kid handled it really well. He was focused more about his legacy there at Zephyrhills. And I thought it was fitting. Like I tweeted, his last high school game, he gets a pick and a long TD catch. That's kind of who he is, right? He's known as a DB, and he's going to play corner at the next level or start his career there. But he's actually Pasco County's all-time leading receiver after that playoff game. So nice. That's where his focus is. And look, you just wrapped up your career with your boys. It wasn't going to be a pushy situation on my end, but yeah. He did confirm the LSU visit this weekend and a December 4th, final decision, which at that moment was for LSU.
Gotcha. Disappointing to hear for most Hurricanes fans or any other fan base that's not the Bayou Bengals. But best of luck to him and his decision on where he will sign next Wednesday. A couple of other players, though, that Miami is thinking about as far as flip targets or want to add to their 2025 class are Ben Hanks, TJ Alford, and Kellen Wiley, who's not a flip target, but, he's a Miami target as well. What's your gauge on these players here? First, you kind of start with Ben Hanks and then Kellen Wiley, and then we'll talk about TJ Alford afterwards.
Yeah, with Ben, he hasn't officially shut it down. I know there was some, I guess, drama with the last visit he was going to take, which was a week ago. We were wondering, is it Miami? Is it Florida? He was expected really at both places, but he ended up confirming that he was going to be back up in Gainesville. I thought that was pretty telling in his recruitment. Again, he hasn't come out and said, hey, I'm done. I'm a Gator. This thing is over. We know Miami is pushing. He's still in the playoffs himself, so there's a lot going on there, which makes this signing day kind of crazy for all of us.
Exactly.
But I do get the sense that look, Florida's momentum is real. I mean, it doesn't take an analyst to relay that message, right? Billy Napier got the vote of confidence, and Florida's started, playing better and well for him. It seemed like, and now you put a couple of upsets on top of that, and they're the hottest team in the country in recruiting. So they have been flipping recruits left and right from other schools. I think 6 prospects have flipped to Florida in the last couple weeks. And they haven't lost any verbal commitments, even though Ben Hanks was a guy who a lot of people had on potential flip watch. It's still there, and it's one you still track until signing day is done. But with all of the momentum and him making that last trip to Gainesville, obviously the Canes are on the road this weekend. I do think that was somewhat telling in what he's going to do next Wednesday. So I would expect him to stick with UF. That is my prediction at this moment. But look, Mario, Cristobal, the Canes, they're going to keep coming. They're not going to slow down for any recruit at any point until the final dust and the final whistle is blown next week. So
Yeah.
Gators right now, but certainly not over.
Interesting how the Gators have been flipping so many guys as of late. It's interesting in the fact that they've had I would say an average season. It looked like it was going to be a bad season, but we kind of turned things around, and it seems like Billy Napier is going to keep his job. I'm assuming maybe that's why that is happening, but even Byron Lewis, which I think is a big surprise that he even chose Florida. Florida wasn't even in his top schools list for the majority of his recruiting process. For him to flip to Florida just seemed it was surprising to me. I think a shock to many. So I'm kind of wondering what they got going on over there in Gainesville to flip these guys. I know I believe they're also interested in Kellen Wiley as well.
Yep.
So what say you on his recruitment, and what are Miami's chances to land that outstanding linebacker from Armwood?
He's wide open. He is like every day it almost feels different. And that's kind of understandable. He is a player who is just now experiencing the boom part of his recruitment. It just so happens that it's his last season, and it's right before signing day. So Florida, Miami, Texas, Bama, Georgia. I mean, so many schools have put in work with him that he's kind of all over the place. He did take a visit to Florida last weekend. They feel good. I don't know if it's a done deal. Miami felt really good before that.
Right.
So I get the sense it comes down to these two, but it's almost too close to call at this point. How much is Miami pushing? I don't have that answer. And it might be the same case at Florida. So he's one that it changes almost every few days. And I get the sense it could pivot another time or two before December 4th.
That will definitely be an interesting signing to watch. And like you said, because it's been kind of avalanching for him in these last couple of weeks and months. I believe he put out a top 8 or 10, 12, something like that recently.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy for a senior to do at this point in his recruitment. So I know his head is probably in a blender right now with all the calls and texts that he's getting. It'll be interesting to see if he visits somewhere though this weekend. So we'll look out for that. Obviously, he won't be visiting Miami. Didn't visit Miami last week, so not sure exactly where Miami stands. But I know they would enjoy to have another outstanding linebacker added to the class. Another outstanding linebacker they're looking to add is Tarvos TJ Alford, and this guy has been committed to Ohio State for a while now. And he's always had a relationship with Miami, however, and that relationship has seemed to be strong and getting stronger, it seems. He's been very, I want to say, not giving away too much as far as what he'll do. He's been saying basically he's committed to Ohio State at this point. We'll see what happens. How do you think this all plays out for the 4-star linebacker from Vero Beach?
This is the guy. I mean, if you're a Canes fan looking for that signature signing day splash, TJ Alford's the guy. Like you said, saying the right things, doing the right things, doing his due diligence. But I think two things have really pushed Miami up his list. One, Miami's effort. We just talked about it. Official visit, follow-up visits. The momentum has never really slowed down with Miami, regardless of his commitment status. So he knows at the U, he's a huge priority. The second thing is, at one point, it looked like, hey, TA was going to stay in the state of Florida, and if he did, it would be with either Miami or FSU. We talked about positive momentum with the Gators. FSU's got the opposite. They can't win a recruiting battle. They can't hold on to their own recruits. So that sort of demise, I think, has helped Miami, because at one point, it almost looked like Miami and FSU were more likely than Ohio State. Right now, it's Miami or Ohio State. So if he's staying in state, if that part of the plan is still important, this is Miami's race to lose. And I think this is the most important flip target for the Canes down the stretch because of that reason.
That will be a very good signing for Miami if they're able to pull off a flip. Last year, Miami pulled off a flip of a Darius Hayes on signing day. So I think, obviously, that it's a possibility that they can get Alford. I agree with you. I think this would be the most likely flip for Miami at this point. But it should be a fun week, like I said, because things will be changing, news will be flowing, the Twitter feed will be lit. Let's just say that. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But are there any other players that Miami, you think could possibly flip, or just to kind of keep an eye on within this next week?
Yeah, I think, at wide receiver, we know there's been a lot of effort put into that group. It's a good group right now. Josh Moore, your big physical guy. Malachi Toney, arguably the best slot in the country. And then Dalen Upshaw is kind of an in-between, type of player. Jacoby George vibes with him to a degree. So you've got a good group right now, but you'd like to add one more if possible. So Jamie French is probably the guy. If there was movement, I'd maybe keep an eye there. But Texas certainly is doing everything on their end to hold on. Florida's trying. Others are trying as well. So I think, that's probably the last, swing away guy for Miami very late in the cycle.
Interesting. Jamie French, I thought that was kind of a done deal to Texas. So we'll keep an eye on Jamie French. Definitely one of my favorite receivers that I watched, especially in this past year in 7-on-7. Watching highlights right now from Malachi Toney, I feel like he makes a big play every time he's on the field. And right now,
forever.
Yeah, and right now he's actually playing quarterback for American Heritage, because Dia Bell went down with an injury. They are still in the playoffs. That should be a very interesting game against Norland this Friday. Of course, loser goes home. So we'll see just what more we can see from Malachi Toney from the quarterback position. We've seen that before with American Heritage with Brandon Ennis a couple of years ago. So that should be very interesting. Miami's class is 7th in the nation at this point. They've got another strong class, another top 10 class. I believe this would be of course, it'd be consecutive years with the top 10 class. Last year they had the 5th ranked class, and I believe the year before they had maybe the 8th ranked class. So top 10 class seems likely once again. When you look at this class, though, who jumps out to you as the prize of this class? Just right now when you look at it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's some strong groups on board. big DB group, right? Both physically and from a volume standpoint. And Miami's had to fend off some folks for some of these guys. Tim Merritt, I know, was one that schools really circled back on.
Right.
Obviously, Bryce Fitzgerald, speaks for himself. But I love the O-line group. Right? I think this is another classic group. And Max Buchanan is one of my favorite players in the country. High floor, ready to go day one. Has that attitude, the swag, all the things you look for from a guy who's going to come in and help sooner rather than later. So I love the O-line group and him in particular. The other guys are more projectable, developmental types, and I think that's something that says a lot about what Miami's able to do confidence-wise on their end. But I think you talked about Byron Lewis earlier. Miami was always mentioned with Byron Lewis from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, up until he committed to Florida State. But it was always about how much Miami pushed. And at the end, we know it wasn't a ton. It wasn't the full speed ahead push. And I think the reason is because Gerard Pringle is very good. The running back out of Armwood in Seffner in the Tampa area. This was going to be, I think, initially a 2, maybe 3 running back class. But the portal and the depth on the current roster didn't, make that a necessity. So Miami's not going to take guys just to take guys. So grabbing Pringle and seeing his development, I think was the gem of this class. I'm getting some Jahmyr Gibbs vibes from him.
I see that.
Is a true home run threat every single time he touches the ball. But like Gibbs, it's not just a speed thing. There's power, balance, vision. The lateral ability is phenomenal. And so is the competitiveness. Yeah. This kid will go line up at corner and try to press you into the ground, and he's got no business doing that. But we saw it, right? We saw it in person. So I think the competitiveness he brings, if he continues to fill out, I think he's going to be looked at as, wow, what an eval, what a get, what a win for Merritt, for Cristobal, for Dawson, for really this entire coaching staff. Because when he committed, it was not with a lot of fanfare. So this could be a real staple in this 25 class.
Yeah, I think it came as a surprise for most that Miami went after this guy like Gerard Pringle. But this was a guy, obviously, that Coach Merritt, the running backs coach for Miami, was recruiting while he was at USF. So he just kind of continued those efforts to bring him down to Miami. When I first kind of saw him, and I was like, okay, well, he's not the biggest guy. But then when you see him on the field, like on this tape that I'm showing, you kind of see everything. Like he's the full
And this is against very good competition. Like
right.
These are D1 guys across the board on defense.
Right, exactly. And it took maybe 2 or 3 guys to take him down every time. I think not only the speed that you see on this play here, but you saw the power from him as well. And from a smaller guy, I was like, okay, wow, he really kind of packs a punch. And I'm really, really excited to see what he does, as a Miami Hurricane, just because, he seems like he kind of plays with a chip on his shoulder. And he proved this season, because every time I looked at his stats every week, it was like him scoring 2-3 touchdowns, or over 100 yards. So it's not only that they found him before the season, but he proved it, that he was every bit worth his 4-star rating on Rivals. So definitely will be excited to see him sign next week. But when you look at this class as well, people, you said the prize, of course, is Pringle. Some people would say Stubbs because he's the obvious 1 5-star on the list. But who's the most underrated player in this class, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, you could make an argument for a lot of guys. I think, could you envision Joshua Moore as a top 30 recruit in this class? Absolutely. 6'4", 210, built like Jeremiah Smith. Some of the same natural athletic traits that he brings to the table, competitor, confident, all of the things on the high end that you want in that number one receiver, that alpha. Just not as consistent, obviously, as a Jeremiah Smith, but who is, right? And I'm not, and I'm twice his age.
Right.
So could he be underrated as a very high level 4-star, as a 5.9 recruit? Yeah, you could make that argument. But I go to another receiver. It's Upshaw. I mean,
Yeah.
this kid plays 7A ball in Alabama, and for those who don't know, that is the highest level in that state. And like you said about Pringle, you look at the stat line every week, and this kid's got a one-headed catch, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns against corners that are going to play in the SEC and the ACC one day. So, he's one that won't overwhelm you when you see him. He's thin, he's lean. He just does not look like Joshua Moore. Let's say that at the least, but he is as productive as Josh, nearly as productive as a Malachi Tony. We just don't see him as much as an industry, not even as a network, as an industry. But he's also got this room to fill out. So you get Jacoby George vibes right now, but what if he gets bigger than Jacoby? But he's got this uncanny, instinctive ability to make plays. So it's one of those things. If he puts it all together, we can look back and say, man, 5.73 stars, a great player, a guy with an NFL, upside. But certainly we should have probably tabbed him a little bit higher. And now he's going back to the state title game as the wide receiver one for, the team that's going to be favored to win it all in that state. So I think we're going to get one more look at him at the Alabama-Mississippi week. We'll see him in the state title game. So we've got one more update to get that thing right. But he's been right there on the cusp of that next star. So he's one that, I'm definitely focused on down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's definitely underrated. I think people forget that he's even committed to the class because he's not a local guy, especially at wide receiver. Like most of the time, Miami takes local guys at wide receiver. Obviously, they have Malachi Tony and Josh Moore. But I think Dalen Upshaw is the forgotten guy here. So I think it's very similar to Nye Carr from the last cycle, as far as his skill set is concerned. He can catch the ball and take it the distance pretty much at any time, as you see from the highlights. And I'm definitely excited to kind of see what he does in the orange and green for this 2025 class. Miami's got the 3 wide receivers. You talked about the 1 running back, which still seems kind of weird that they only got 1 running back. Of course, they got Luke Nickel, the quarterback. You talked about the O-line, looks great as well. The linebacker core, I think, is a solid group, and the defensive back group probably the best group of all. But when you look at this final week, and then obviously this is the early signing period, so they can still sign guys all the way up until February. What do you think is kind of the missing piece here of the 2025 class for Miami?
That's a great question. It's probably in the middle of the defense, whether you look at a defensive tackle spot or an inside linebacker spot. I'd probably go with one of those two. I think Alford is a true 3-down backer. If you get him, I think you check that box in a big way. Defensive tackle wise, I just don't know how much Miami pushed for some of these other candidates. Is Jarquez Carter still on the board? How solid is he to Ohio State? He's been real quiet lately.
Yes.
With his own words, and understandably so. Again, still in the playoffs. I mean, these kids are incredibly busy. So, could something like that come maybe out of left field and be a pleasant surprise? Absolutely. Because, right now in terms of position projections on Rivals, you got one DT in this class, and it's Dante Simpson, who is a good player. He's gotten better every year at Chaminade. He's certainly the alpha of that defensive line and has made a ton of plays, but he's more of a pass rushing interior guy.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Maybe the portal's the answer. Maybe it's just young guys on the current roster. I'm not sure there is, cold weather playoff type defensive tackles on this verbal commitment list. So I'd look in the middle of the defense if I had to find a hole. But overall, big group, balanced group, and some projectable guys that you could probably fit there if you had to. So hard to poke holes.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in love with Jarquez Carter. I think I fell in love with him at the Rivals 5-star. Just his strength, his speed. He's kind of everything that you kind of want in a defensive tackle. Disappointed to kind of hear him commit to Ohio State. But like you said, he has been quiet, and I believe Miami's still interested in adding him to the class. So I think he's a name to watch as well, as far as a surprise name to sign to the class that's not already committed. So, and plus his teammate, Micah Newton, is, committed to Miami as well. So I'm sure he's in his ear before every play, probably trying to get him to commit to the U. So, should be a fun week, John, man. I know you're going to be busy. Of course, everyone here at Rivals is going to be very busy. It's probably our busiest week of the year coming up. Like I said, I wish it was a little later, because I'm sure these kids probably wish it was a little later as well, with a lot of these kids in the playoffs, still in the playoffs here. So
plus Thanksgiving. I mean, it's wild.
Right, Thanksgiving as well. Yeah, it's going to be a crazy week, but it should be fun though, as it always is, leading up to National Signing Day. That's John Garcia, ladies and gentlemen, joining me from Rivals.com. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you soon. I'll probably see you sometime next week when we, somehow gather ourselves.
Sounds good.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. And make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Most importantly, subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Until the next episode.